This took place a few years ago when I was living in a small town near Jacksonville, Florida. I was working part-time at a local historical society that preserved and told stories about old buildings around the city. One building that always grabbed my attention was the old Annie Lytle Elementary School, sometimes called the Devil's School by locals. It had been shut down since the 1960s when new highways isolated it from the neighborhood, and it was falling into decay. Most people avoided it, but students from nearby schools would sometimes dare each other to sneak into the basement, which had long been rumored to hold dark secrets. Life in that town was slow and quiet, afternoons spent raking leaves as fall settled in, the air cool and heavy with the smell of damp earth and roasting wood from backyard bonfires. Kids played football until dusk, and the streets were sprinkled with leaves in hues of orange and deep red. Working at the society, I had access to old maps and documents, and I became fascinated by the school's history. The rigid principal, Annie Lytle, who had been said to keep a tight and unforgiving rule. I also heard whispers of a janitor, a man no one really talked about who disappeared without explanation years ago. At first, my visits to the school were part of research. I'd spend afternoons cataloging items in the basement and the unused boiler room, rooms layered thick with dust and shadows. The basement always smelled faintly of rust and mildew. Old lockers lined the walls, some hanging open with nothing inside but peeling paint. When I explored deeper, a small room resembling a meat locker caught my eye, its door sealed with rusted bolts and the faint metallic scent of old blood hovering in the stale air. The local stories began to creep into my mind. They claimed that years ago, the principal was involved in sinister acts. Students supposedly vanished, and it was said she kept them locked in that meat locker closet, tortured, even killed. The janitor, they said, took some students to the boiler room and did unspeakable things, boiling them alive in the massive iron vats. It was, of course, the kind of tale told to scare kids away from the building, but still, the shadow of the stories lingered. One autumn day, the air outside was crisp and leaves danced in small whirlpools behind the building. I was examining faded graffiti in the basement when the lights flickered violently. The old boiler thumped, a deep, pulsing beat, though I was alone and the building's power was supposed to be off. Then, faint but unmistakable, came the sound of footsteps, slow, heavy, dragging across the concrete floor. At first I thought it was just the wind or rats, but the thuds came steadily closer, echoing through the hollow cellar. My heart rate spiked. I told myself it was nothing, maybe an animal trapped inside or a stray box falling, but when I rounded the corner near the meat locker room, the rusty door swung open slightly, creaking like it hadn't moved in decades. A chill crawled over me, the temperature dropping fast despite my jacket. In the dim light, I thought I saw a shadow slip inside. I called out, but my voice barely echoed. The only reply was the faint scrape of metal against concrete. I stepped closer, and without warning, an explosion rocked the building, a massive, fiery blast that sent me tumbling back. Smoke and fire filled the basement, and debris rained down like shattered glass. I scrambled to escape as sirens blared in the distance. Firefighters and police flooded the site, confirming multiple casualties inside the boiler room. A tragic accident, they said, caused by gas leaks. But the locals whispered something darker. Some believed the past horrors had come alive again, that the souls of the lost students still lingered, trapped in that cursed basement. In the aftermath, the school was sealed off completely. The demolition was debated but never carried out, deemed a historical landmark. No one goes near the building at night, and sometimes on quiet autumn evenings when the wind rustles through dying leaves and the sky fades into blue-black, I swear I still hear muffled cries and the distant thump of heavy footsteps from beyond those locked basement doors. I don't know what's real anymore. The official reports say it was an accident. But when you hear the stories, see the scars the building has left on those who dared enter, it feels like some darkness has never left that school. Annie Lytle Elementary wasn't just a school. It was a place where shadows lived, and some part of that darkness still waits, hungry and patient. This happened about 5 years ago, when I was a junior at Ridgefield High School, a small town school that looked straight out of an old movie. Red brick walls, creaky hallways, those buzzing fluorescent lights that made every classroom feel half awake. Most of us had heard rumors that there was a basement under the school, but no one had actually seen it. Teachers said it was used for maintenance or storage, cleaning supplies, old furniture, that kind of stuff. It was always locked, and no one really questioned it. At least not until Jake did. Jake wasn't a troublemaker. He was one of those quiet kids, always had earbuds in, sketching in his notebook during free periods. He used to hang out near the back stairwell, the one that barely anyone used because it led to the old part of the school that had been closed off years ago. That's where it happened. One day during his free period, Jake texted me, "Bro, the basement door's open." I thought he was joking, but he sent me a picture. It was this narrow metal door, paint chipped and rusted, just slightly ajar. You could see the top of a stairwell leading down into the dark. He said the janitor must have forgotten to lock it. I didn't think much of it, but Jake, being Jake, decided to go down. He told me later that the air changed as soon as he stepped in. It smelled damp, like rust and mold. His phone flashlight barely cut through the dark, but he could see old desks, broken chairs, boxes stacked to the ceiling, decades of junk from when the school was newer. And in the middle of the room, sitting all by itself on the floor, was a small metal box. It wasn't dusty like everything else. It looked recent. He said it was about the size of a lunchbox, silver, with a latch on the front. At first he thought it might be tools or old documents, but when he opened it, that's when things got weird. Inside was a single envelope. Old, yellowed, but sealed. He opened it carefully. Inside was a faded student ID. The photo was blurry, black and white, and the name wasn't anyone he recognized. Under the name it said Class of 1986. Underneath that ID were car keys, old ones, heavy metal with a worn-out plastic tag, and beneath the keys, a folded newspaper clipping. The headline read, "High school senior still missing, car found abandoned in school parking lot." Jake said he froze. The photo in the paper was the same as the one on the ID. He told me he slammed the box shut, grabbed his phone, and ran up the stairs as fast as he could. When he told me about it later that day, I could tell he wasn't lying. His hands were still shaking. We went to tell our history teacher, Ms. Reardon. She didn't believe us at first, but agreed to check, probably to prove us wrong. She got the janitor to unlock the basement again. I waited upstairs near the door while they went down. A few minutes later, she came back up frowning. "There's nothing down there," she said. "No box. No envelope. Nothing." Jake insisted. It was right there in the middle of the room. She just sighed. "Then maybe you imagined it. You're not supposed to be down there anyway." But I could see her face. She looked uneasy. Later that day, the janitor stopped Jake in the hallway. He was an older guy, quiet, always pushing his cart around after school. He said, "Hey kid, next time, don't go where you're not supposed to. Some things in this building are better left alone." And then he just walked away. That night, Jake texted me again. He said he couldn't stop thinking about the ID. He'd written the name down before running out, Rachel McCall. So we searched it online. There was barely anything. Just one small-town newspaper archive that mentioned a missing senior from Ridgefield High, last seen leaving the school late one evening after choir practice. Her car was found in the parking lot the next morning. No trace of her ever found. That was it. A few days later, Jake stopped coming to school. At first, everyone thought he was sick. Then a week passed. Then 2. His mom called the school saying he'd been having nightmares, refusing to leave his room. She didn't give details, but one thing she said stuck with me. "He keeps saying someone's knocking on his window at night." I tried visiting once, but he wouldn't open the door. He just said, "I shouldn't have opened that box." After that, his family moved away suddenly. No one really heard from him again. The weird part? A few months later, when I was helping clean out the art room before summer break, I saw the janitor wheeling a cart past me. On top of it, half covered with a cloth, was a small metal box. Same size, same shape. I started to say something, but he looked right at me and said quietly, "Don't." Then he walked off toward the basement stairs. I never told anyone else about that. Every time I walk past that hallway, I swear I hear a faint metallic sound, like something being dragged slowly across the floor. And sometimes when the school's quiet, I could swear I hear a girl's voice, humming softly from somewhere below. I don't know what Jake found that day in the basement of Ridgefield High, but whatever it was never meant to be found. It was October, right in the middle of fall when the world outside starts to look like a scene from an old movie. The leaves were a collage of burnt orange, deep crimson, and faded yellow, littering the sidewalks in thick, crunchy piles. The air had that unmistakable chill that settled in just after sunset, sharp enough to make your breath visible but not yet winter espite. That kind of quiet where even the wind sounds distant and hesitant. I was a junior in high school that year. Nothing particularly remarkable about me. I wasn't a troublemaker, just your typical kid trying to survive late-night study sessions, football games, and the general chaos of teenage life. On this one particular evening, I found myself stuck waiting alone in the school after practice until my mom could pick me up. It was about 6:30, and the sun had just dipped below the trees, casting long shadows across the empty parking lot. It was the kind of evening that should have felt peaceful, but I guess sometimes peace can breed an unsettling kind of loneliness. I had a few minutes to kill and thought I might swing by my locker in the basement to grab a book I forgot. Everyone else had already left or was scattered around the building, so I figured I could just wait down there before heading out. The school itself was old, built in the late 50s, with faded brick walls and countless stories whispered among the students for decades. The basement felt like a world of its own, dark, damp, and poorly lit with those flickering fluorescent bulbs that buzzed in odd rhythms. I felt the breeze off the open stairwell as I stepped down. The smell hit me instantly, the wet earthiness mixed with an old metal tang from the boiler room nearby. The leaves outside rustled against the window panes, while a few stray crickets chirped faintly. Everything seemed so normal on the surface. But then came the noise. It started as a faint scraping, quiet, but deliberate. I stopped mid-step, listening closely. The sound was inconsistent, almost like light footsteps shuffled against concrete or a chair scraping across the floor. Then, from somewhere near the supply closet at the far end of the hall, I heard a whisper. The voice said one word, barely audible but clear enough to chill me. Chester. My heart instantly kicked into overdrive. I scanned the shadows but saw no one. I told myself it was probably echoing from the janitor Wes's radio, or maybe just my imagination running wild. Just as I started moving again, my instincts screamed for me to be still. Suddenly, a figure emerged from behind the supply closet. A person, maybe in their late teens or early 20s, wearing a hood pulled low over their face. Dark clothes, no identifying marks, and the sort of slow, deliberate movements that made the hairs on my neck stand up. The dim basement light barely caught their features, and I got the sudden, horrible feeling they weren't supposed to be there. I didn't know what to do. Speak up? Run? I froze. The figure looked straight at me and whispered the same name again. Chester. It wasn't a student I knew, or anyone I recognized from school. I backed toward the nearest closet and slipped inside just before they moved forward. My heart thundered so loudly I thought it might betray my hiding spot. I squeezed myself into the dark, cramped space, listening as footsteps circled outside. The muffled sounds of whispered words drifted through the closet door, but I couldn't make them out. I pressed my ear against the cold wall and stayed perfectly still. Time crawled. Minutes passed, or maybe just seconds. Then, just like that, the footsteps moved away. I waited for what felt like hours before I mustered the courage to peek out. The basement was empty again, eerie in its silence. My body stayed tense as I climbed out, eyes darting toward the small basement window near the stairs. Through the grime, I caught the silhouette of the figure climbing out and disappearing into the thick shadow of the giant oak tree outside. Shaking, I ran up the stairs and out of the building, feeling the cool, damp autumn air hit my face. The distant call of an owl echoed through the branches as leaves skittered across the asphalt. My mind was racing. Who was that? How did they get in? What did they want? I could barely catch my breath long enough to call my mom. The next day I reported everything to the school administration, hoping they'd take it seriously. But the police found no record of anyone named Chester as a student or staff member. The janitors confirmed no strange people had been spotted around the basement recently. Security footage showed nothing unusual, just the normal empty hallways. It was as if the intruder had never existed. The weirdest part? I wasn't the only one who experienced strange things down there. I heard rumors from other students, whispers in empty halls, flickering lights where no switches were touched, and sometimes footsteps that echoed when no one was around. Some older kids said the basement had a reputation, stories passed down like warnings about a creepy figure haunting the shadows, but no one talked about what really happened that night. For weeks after the incident, I avoided the basement entirely. The dark, musty corridors haunted my dreams, the chill of that night lingering like an unwelcome ghost. Even when I walked past the school's windows on my way home, I felt eyes on me, shadows brushing at the edge of my vision. One evening, weeks later, as the October nights grew colder and the leaves piled thick along the sidewalks, I noticed something on the old basement window. The faint outline of handprints smeared against the glass too high for me to reach. They were smudged and partially wiped, but unmistakably human. My blood ran cold. No one admitted to putting them there. The janitor said they were probably old, leftovers from a previous tenant or maybe a prank. But I knew. The basement's darkness wasn't just concrete and pipes. Something or someone had been there, hiding in the shadows when no one was looking. And whoever or whatever it was, they weren't gone. Sometimes at night, when the leaves rustle in the wind and the air turns that crisp, sharp cold, I swear I hear it again. The slow, deliberate footsteps. The hushed whisper of a name. Chester. And it makes me wonder if that night was just the beginning of something darker. Something waiting patiently in the basement, watching. Waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to wander down the stairs.